Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Alex Cuesta Daily Show. Really happy to have you join me here on January 20th, 2022. Have another great show ahead of us. One that was actually really hard to decide on what to do, and I'll explain in a second. But first, if you like what you hear over the last episodes that any of you have listened to, or if you like what you hear today in this episode, please like, subscribe, share, rate this podcast 5 stars, spread it word of mouth, tell everyone it's the greatest show you ever heard. Even if it isn't, just do it, because that helps make us bigger and will help get this podcast out to more people so that more people can hear what I think is the truth of a lot of things and can be exposed to just more, because more exposure is better. And that's how I feel about that. So let's get going right in with this. The reason why it was hard today was because I read a bunch of articles, as I always do, in terms of prepping for what I want to do on the show. And I had a few in particular that it boiled down to. Now, the one that I ultimately didn't choose was IRS to require facial recognition to view tax returns. That was written today. It's from the website Zero Hedge, and it's by Tyler Durden. I don't know if it's necessary to protect themselves. I don't know what Zero Hedge is. If Zero Hedge isn't legit, I don't know. Someone let me know if they're listening, if Zero Hedge is legit. But if it is legit, then it's pretty, there's things on it that make it seem like it might be legit. They talk about how the IRS might be using ID.me to start having people identify themselves before they can view their tax returns. I have experience with ID.me. I had to use it in order to collect my unemployment in the state of New York fairly recently. So it is something that's real. So it makes me, and I've had to deal with it. So it makes me think that there is some credence to this. It might be something I do tomorrow. Maybe it could be tomorrow's article, but I read a bunch, so I might find something I like better. But we're going to shift our focus to the article that I'm talking about today. It is a Newsweek article, and it is written by Caroline Glick. She's an author and senior columnist for Israel Hayom, and she also writes for Newsweek in the opinion section. And the title is Gaslighting Anti-Semitism in America. Now, this branches from the attack that happened over this weekend on Saturday the 15th, over in Colleyville, Texas, where the Congregation of Beth Israel, there were 4 individuals held up by an Islamicist terrorist. We're going to be blunt with it here. The guy is an Islamicist terrorist, not to be mistaken for somebody that practices Islam or a Muslim. There is a difference between the extremists, and that's something that needs to be made clear, because there are people on the left that like to conflate that like to make that a talking point, that when you're talking about an Islamicist, so talking about a terrorist that believes in ridiculous, insanely things, a radical, that you're speaking to the totality of the Muslim population. And that's just not true. But they like to do that because they like to put everybody in a box. So if you talk about one Muslim or one person that practices Islam, all of a sudden you're talking about all of them, and one person needs to speak for all of them. That is what the left does, and it is wrong. Individual basis here. Just because this person's a dick and a terrorist doesn't mean that all Muslims or people that practice the faith of Islam are dicks or terrorists. So let's jump into this opinion piece. It is a scathing opinion piece. Let's go right away with it. Starting off, Malik Faisal Akram, the British national who seized 4 hostages at gunpoint at Congregational Beth Israel in Colleyville, Texas, during Sabbath services, was straightforward about who he was and what he wanted. Upon entering the synagogue, wielding a gun and claiming he had a bomb in his backpack, Akram began ranting against the Jews and Jewish power and demanded the release of an al-Qaeda terrorist serving an 86-year prison term at a federal prison 20 miles from Beth Israel. To achieve his goal, he took the rabbi and 3 congregants hostage. He had the rabbi call another rabbi in New York. The rabbi in New York works at the Central Synagogue. So let's just start right there. The only background what we were fed is that there was a hostage situation in a synagogue, and they didn't tell you much more to begin with. The only issue they had is if they were trying to cover this one up, this was being live streamed, the service. So you heard the man ranting and raving in the background, talking about having a gun, talking about Jews, talking about the release of an individual we're going to mention soon. And it gave away the game pretty quick that this was an Islamicist, that this was a terror act. But when you were reading the unfolding of it, people were being very scared, even some on the right, for calling this out for what it was right away. Let's continue with the article. You don't need to be a professional anti-Semitism researcher to understand that a man railing against Jewish power who demands the intercession of a rabbi at a place called Central Synagogue in New York City on behalf of an Al-Qaeda terrorist hates, fears, and is obsessed with Jews. You don't need any special training to understand that Akram believed a Jewish cabal controls the world, and that this belief caused him to storm a synagogue by the prison where his celebrity terrorist is incarcerated during Sabbath services in order to take Jews hostage. In other words, anyone with eyes could see that Akram's motive in attacking the synagogue and taking Jewish hostages was anti-Semitic. It was obvious that he acted in a premeditated way. He selected his target and worked out his game plan ahead of time. And yet, the FBI managed to miss it all. At a press briefing, after the hostages had managed to escape and FBI officers killed Akram, FBI special agent in charge, Matt DeSarno, dismissed anti-Semitism as Akram's motive. Akram, DeSarno said, was, quote, singularly focused on one issue, unquote, and that was, quote, specifically related to the Jewish Akram, DeSarno said, was singularly focused on one issue that was not specifically related to the Jewish community. We are continuing to work to find the motive, DeSarno said. Now, they were lying. We're going to put that out there. The FBI, this special agent, was flat out lying. It was clear to see what his motives were. It was clear it was anti-Semitism. And it's very funny when the powers that be, the FBI, all these types of places, likes to sit there and play it safe, or they like to be brash and out front. It seems like when it serves political purposes, they do certain things. It's really curious. But the FBI, this is yet another misstep in an agency that needs to be abolished because they are a sham and a shell of what they used to be. And it's not even just the higher ups, it's the rank and file. Because if you're a rank and file agent and you're willing to go and do this shit, and you're willing to sit there and go along with it, then yes, you are at fault as well. So I'm not holding anyone. The FBI needs to be released and needs to be done. There is no need for us to have a national police anyway. Let's continue. President Joe Biden, for his part, rightly referred to the attack as a terror attack, but Biden insisted as well that it was too early to know why he was using anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli comments. Is he serious right now? Well, we know Joe Biden's an idiot, so that's not surprising. But why he was using anti-Semitic and anti-Israeli comments? By that time, we knew the man's name. We knew the man's name was Malik Faisal Akram, a very, very Arab-sounding name. Could he have converted at some point to Christianity and might have just kept his name? Possibly. But the chances are that he was an Islamicist. And it's funny when people like Joe Biden choose to go and rail against certain things or not. If it was a situation where there seemed to be a white supremacist, you best hell believe that they would have called it out right away. Let's continue. The sense that the FBI and Biden were gaslighting grew as more information came out about the identity of the terrorist. Akram flew to America from Brazil, bought a gun, and seized Jewish hostages at a Texas synagogue in hopes of freeing Afia Siddiqui, that's her name, otherwise known as Lady Al-Qaeda, was sentenced to 86 years in prison in 2010 for attempting to murder a U.S. serviceman in Afghanistan. While in Afghan custody, Siddiqui seized the rifle of a U.S. officer who was sent to the jail with a team of other officers to interrogate Siddiqui. She managed to get off 2 shots before other U.S. personnel returned fire and neutralized her. Afghan police arrested Siddiqui outside of the compound of an Afghan provincial governor after they found plans to make radioactive dirty bombs, as well as a list of U.S. landmarks in her handbag. During her 2010 trial in New York, Siddiqui demanded that no Jews be permitted to serve on her jury and that prospective jurors undergo DNA testing to ensure they had no Jewish ancestry. So this woman is insane, and she is a terrorist, and she is an awful human and an evil person, and she's very anti-Semitic. This is who Akram was demanding needed to be released. The moment you heard him on the live stream demanding her release, you knew what this was if you paid attention at all. There's no reason why someone would go into a synagogue and demand the release of a known terrorist anti-Semite if he was not as well a terrorist anti-Semite. They kind of walk hand in hand there. It's not hard to put together. Let's continue here. After Siddiqui was convicted, she blamed the all-powerful Jewish cabal, in her mind headquartered in the Jewish state of Israel, for her conviction. In other words, quote, "This is a verdict coming from Israel, not America. That's where the anger belongs," unquote. Akram wasn't the first Islamic terrorist to seek Siddiqui's release. The Islamic State twice offered to swap U.S. hostages for Siddiqui. The Taliban and Al-Qaeda also offered to swap U.S. and other Western hostages for Lady Al-Qaeda, who earned advanced degrees in MIT and Brandeis. So let's stop right there. How many of these terrorists, these Islamicists, are going to have their education in higher institutions, very respected higher institutions in the West? It makes you question what they are learning in the West and these higher education areas. It really does. And we know that education is fucked. We know that the critical theories have all started to run through. And if you don't know, then you need to know. Then you need to start paying attention. We know that Gramsci and his long marches through the institution and things like that are coming to be. There is heavy, heavy Marxism in there. There is heavy, heavy collectivism in all these high institutions. Please go look it up. And, Brian Stelter's worst phrase, do your own homework, do your own research, because Brian Stelter's an idiot. Let's continue. Terrorists and terror groups aren't the only actors working for Siddiqui's release. Ostensibly moderate American Muslim groups also lobby on Siddiqui's behalf. Moderate is a very, very, very loose term here in my eyes. The Council on American Islamic Relations, dubbed CAIR, has held repeated rallies for Siddiqui's release. Well-known Muslim American activist and notorious anti-Semite Linda Sarsour spoke at an online CAIR rally for Siddiqui's release in November. Linda Sarsour is a shithead, by the way. She sucks. She sucks. She calls out other women who speak against Sharia law because they don't want to have female genital mutilation, and calls them liars, and stands up there and also says that she's for women and united with women. She's a goddamn fraud. Continuing with the article. Other major Islamic groups have actively lobbied and protested on Siddiqui's behalf. The Muslim American Society, American Muslims for Palestine, and the Islamic Circle of North America, among others, have all participated in efforts to secure her release. The IFA Foundation was formed to lobby on her behalf. Mosques from Boston to Los Angeles have held events calling for Siddiqui's release as well. And I'll tell you right now, if you're calling for Siddiqui's release, if your mosque is calling for it, if your organization is calling for it, you should be flagged. You should officially be flagged. You should be flagged, and you should now be investigated. And every person that is there should be considered a potential threat to the country and to the West. If you don't like it, don't join the mosque or talk out about it, because you are talking about a terrorist, an anti-Semitic terrorist. And people say we don't want Islamophobia. We don't want to label Muslims as these bad things in America. And I agree. Not all Muslims are bad. Islamophobia is fucking stupid. But when you have these major organizations that represent a lot of Muslims, and when you have mosques, major mosques in these areas that are attended, yes, you might not hold those personal beliefs. If you attend mosque, you might know that specific one. You might just want to be going to practice your faith. but there is such things as guilty by association. And if you know that there is a ton of anti-Semitic stuff going around in your mosque, and if you don't believe in it, then leave the mosque or stand up against it. Be brave. Be brave. And they're going to get into CARE more in this article. I don't need to, but CARE is easily the worst. Let's continue. The involvement of these U.S. Muslims group in an effort to secure Siddiqui's release points to an explanation for DeSarno's denial of Akram's anti-Semitic motive for storming a synagogue during Sabbath services and taking 4 Jews hostage. While CARE was listed by the FBI as a Hamas front group in the U.S. and was an unindicted co-conspirator in the 2008 Holy Land Foundation terror financial trial, the FBI has a sordid history of working with the Islamist terrorist supporting outfit. So there you go. CARE openly supports terrorism. They have come out in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood. CARE is a terrorist, a Islamicist terrorist organization housed in the United States. They are not good people, which was hilarious, which was absolutely hilarious when I read that a CARE spokesperson was talking about how they stand in solidarity with the Jews that were held hostage and hope for a good, great turnout and everyone to be released. They were lying through their teeth. CARE was hoping that this person actually had a bomb or killed all 4 of those people in that synagogue and then martyred themselves. That's what CARE was hoping for. Don't get it twisted. All right, let's keep going. Not only does CARE agitate on behalf of terrorists such as Siddiqui, many of CARE's leaders have open records of anti-Semitic pronouncements similar to Akram's and Siddiqui's. For instance, less than 2 months ago, Zara Bilou, who heads the CARE San Francisco branch, delivered a viciously anti-Jewish speech at an event for American Muslims for Palestine. Bilou blasted all Zionists, which she defines as anyone who supports the mere existence of the Jewish state of Israel. She called American Muslims to reject overtures and shun what she describes even as polite Zionists. Quote, "We need to pay attention to the Anti-Defamation League. We need to pay attention to Jewish federations, the Zionist synagogues, halal chapters on our campuses. Those who support the two-state solution are our enemies," Bilou seethed. So Bilou is a terrorist. Everybody listen up. Bilou is a terrorist or someone that is sympathetic to terrorism. FBI. Fuck you, FBI. You suck. Somebody put her on a list. This is a person that needs to be on a list. I'm sorry. You have no credence. I'm not talking about Minority Report stuff. This person does not deserve to be arrested, but we need to pay attention. Not much better than Louis Farrakhan. I'm not gonna lie. Louis Farrakhan is an anti-Semitic asshole. He needs to be someone who's on a list because they do incite this type of stuff. We heard the left talk for years about Donald Trump inciting violence, but they are quiet with people like this that incite violence and are responsible. They are responsible for these attacks on Jews. They are. We're going to continue. Obviously, the FBI would have a hard time acknowledging that Akram was an Islamic terrorist motivated by anti-Semitism when the FBI itself works with groups that are viciously anti-Semitic and support Islamic terrorists. The FBI was harshly criticized in the wake of DeSarno's infuriating statement. And in the face of widespread criticism, it reversed course on Sunday and acknowledged that Akram was indeed a terrorist who was motivated by anti-Semitism. It took him a full day to figure this out when there was a live stream of him making anti-Semitic and terroristic statements and demanding a terrorist release. Let's continue. Unfortunately, unless the FBI decides to end its cooperation with American Muslim groups that share Akram and Siddiqui's anti-Jewish Islamist worldview, it is hard to believe that the FBI's changed position is sincere or that it will be backed by credible, sustained efforts to protect American Jews and Jewish institutions from the threat of Islamicist anti-Semitic attacks. Not to mention that the FBI has no credibility anymore. That from Comey leaking documents to start the Trump impeachment, to them planning a capture of Gretchen Whitmer in Michigan in order to try and make it look like white Trump supporters wanted to capture her, to the questionable potential of feds being at January 6th and orchestrating a whole ton of it. You know, it didn't look good when Ted Cruz was grilling that FBI representative, and all she could say is, I cannot answer that, to questions of whether feds or informants were involved. It's not a good look. The FBI cannot be trusted. Continuing. And if that is the situation with the FBI, the situation with the Democratic Party and the Biden administration specifically is far worse. Kerr's status as an unindicted co-conspirator in the largest terror financing trial in U.S. history caused the FBI to temper its work with the group. But the Democrats feel no such compunction. More than 100 Democratic lawmakers from both houses of Congress have formally voiced their support for Kerr because they don't care, pun intended, about people, about America. And I hate using that because I hate when Democrats are anti-American. But if you are working with groups like this, what else could you be called? What else could you be called? Kerr is not something that is here for American Muslims to get ahead or be protected. Kerr has been accused of being a co-conspirator of terrorism. They are openly in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood. If you support Kerr, you're a bad person and you should be voted out. Where are those names of those 100 Democratic lawmakers? Vote them out. Let's continue. Vice President Kamala Harris had close relations with Kerr, both during her tenure as California Attorney General and during her U.S. Senate stint. Senior Biden administration officials also enjoy close ties with Kerr. Bad people. They are all bad people. Our vice president's a terrible human. Outside of just Kerr, she sucks. Let's keep going here. Kerr worked on a bill with Representative Ilhan Omar, Democrat from Minnesota, that was recently approved by the House of Representatives in a straight party line vote. Omar's bill would require the president to appoint a special envoy for Islamophobia. Critics of the bill, such as Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser, warn that if the Combating International Islamophobia Act is passed into law, the U.S. will effectively bar criticism of Islam and also find itself supporting militant jihadists who define any criticism of Islam as blasphemy. And to go on top of that, remember when I mentioned the Minority Report stuff? All they would have to do is accuse someone of being Islamophobic. And then all of a sudden, boom, investigation. This is a way to sit there and, one of the big things now is if somebody cries somebody's racist or says that they believe that what somebody says is racist or if they're sexist, those are two things that can get people disqualified from jobs, can get them fired from jobs, can get them canceled from society. This is just a way of adding Islamophobia to the list. And like it said, if an Islamicist really does do a terror attack, which they do a lot, most of them around the world right now, if they really do one and you criticize it, you're now open for investigation. It is taking away freedoms. And Ilhan Omar married her brother to get him here illegally as a citizen, which is fucked up enough. But she's also openly anti-Semitic and has been and has made many statements that are anti-Semitic. And that's who Minnesota votes in. Minnesota, you suck. Let's continue. We're almost done here. In the space of 3 years, anti-Semitic terrorists have attacked Jews in synagogues 4 times. 2 were conducted by white supremacists, and 1 was conducted by a black nationalist. Akram is an Islamicist Jew hater. The white supremacists who attacked synagogues in Pittsburgh and Poway, California, were rightly treated as terrorists and condemned from coast to coast. Their actions received massive coverage across the media. The black nationalist who attacked Jews in Monse, New York, was found unfit to stand trial on federal hate crime charges due to mental illness. Black nationalists who murdered 2 Jews and a non-Jew cashier at a kosher supermarket in Jersey City around the same time were supported by some in the local black community, including a member of a local school board. And Akram's attack on Beth Israel, of course, was mischaracterized by both the FBI and the President of the United States. All of this points to a devastating reality. Jews in the United States are being targeted by 3 distinct types of anti-Semites, but they are only being protected against 1. And that's the damn truth. And I have to point out, the 2 white nationalists are on the left. I don't care what you say. White nationalism is not a right-leaning thing. Conservatives and people on the right don't compartmentalize. That's not what they do. Collectivists compartmentalize. People might not like Dinesh D'Souza, but he interviewed, I forget, it wasn't David Duke. It was another really prominent white supremacist, one of the big leaders of it, unapologetic of it. And when he started asking him about some of the points that are very left, he agrees with all of them. He's not on the right. The man is not on the right. White supremacists are not on the right. They are leftists. And Black nationalists are also leftists. These are all leftist attacks. Let's just get that right out there. So it's just very true. And it's sad what's going on. And throughout history, Jews have not been safe. They've never been safe. They've always been attacked everywhere they go. And it's always put on the Jews. It's always their fault for some reason. And it's not true. This opinion piece does a good job of pointing out all the things that happen against them and all the people that are seemingly for the Jew hatred. They whether they paint it off as supporting Muslims or whatever it is, in the end, you are hurting a whole religious group of people that for the most part just want to be left the hell alone. They just want to be left alone to practice and do what they do. Outside of that, it's a terrible, terrible time. I'm happy that all the hostages got out in this situation, but this is a good article that shows to light that the left claims a lot of things. They are not anything else but power hungry. And they will say what they have to say, and they will side with people like them. Only people like them, and they only truly support people like them only. Where, like you saw in this article, the white nationalists who attacked it were widely condemned coast to coast, including people on the right. But the Black nationalists, maybe a few on the left, blue check marks on Twitter condemned it, but I doubt it was highly condemned. This one, the only reason I'm telling you right now, the only reason it got national attention like this was because it was a live stream and it couldn't be denied that this man was an Islamist terrorist from the jump. It could not be denied. Because one thing the left knows, whatever you say first, whatever you put out first is what people remember. They don't remember the corrections. And that's what it is. So even in this situation, what was put out first was it was not an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. He was just driven to try and get the freedom of this known anti-Semitic terrorist. But no, it wasn't against Jews. That is what will be remembered by majority of people in this story. Although it feels like a terrorist attack, although it definitely smells and sounds anti-Semitic, the FBI said it. So I know, I guess we got to trust the FBI. So that's what we get out of this piece. It was a great piece by Caroline Glick. Surprising piece out of Newsweek, not going to lie, but it is a true piece and it is a good piece and it is a piece that we all need to keep in mind. And whenever you're thinking of voting for the left, just remember you're supporting CARE and in turn, you're supporting terrorism. I know that is a very far reach and it's not something we should do, but damn it, stop voting for people like Joe Biden. Stop voting for Kamala Harris. Stop voting for Ilhan Omar. They do not have your best interest in mind. So don't do it. I'm not saying Republicans do. I'm not saying all the people on the right have your interest in mind either, but do your research on them and know that in this current iteration of the left, 99.9% of them absolutely suck. But I thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it. You can find the show anywhere you can find a podcast. Again, like, share, rate 5 stars, hit subscribe, and spread this on word of mouth. Find us on socials, anywhere you can find. Anywhere you use socials, go search the Alex Cuesta Show. We are there. And again, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate it all. Talk to you tomorrow.